Hola community, welcome to Blender.Today live number 63. Today, there's just so many things. I started this week by going through the last commits from last week, and it's over 300 changes were done last week. Why? Because it's the UI freeze week. Today / tomorrow / in the next couple of days, the UI, the user interface of Blender should be locked, in the sense that if you take a screenshot of, or if you make a tutorial this week, like at the end of the week, it should stay the same for the 2.80 release. Should be compatible, because a lot of people were making already some tutorials and they would get out of date, or like the buttons will shuffle around because of the nature of fixing things, getting feedback. So now at the end of this week, it should be okay for making documentation, which is the huge part of the new release, right? Also for translations, that will take place a bit later. So because maybe some tooltips need some tweaking for the new tools, but that everything else should be okay. So is everything okay? Yes, thank you for the thumbs up. Everything is okay, cool. All right, let's get to it, because there's just so many things to see. Look at my list today. I have a Google Doc with like all kinds of stuff. Insane. So first of all, by the way, if you want to ask questions, we are live. It's 5 p.m. here in Europe Central Times. And thanks to Momotron for making this thread on Blender.Today. That's a website where we're going to be answering questions if there is any time left, because this, as you can see, the list for today is huge. There are improvements all over the place, from the user interface, the user experience, so like key maps and stuff, new defaults, color management stuff, Eevee, animation, grease pencil, and a bunch of others that I could not fit in any category. So all right, let's get to it. First, let's open Blender, right? Let's see how it looks. So I just compiled my Blender here, and it should be fairly close to what you can get. I think in the build, but the one that you can get, there's still maybe some differences here. I'm gonna start, when I go load the factory startup settings, just to make sure that I'm using the same Blender that everybody's gonna use. And that is already in a new part. The menus of the top bar got a bit reshuffled for better organization, to make more sense. There was a few shuffling things around over the week, but now this is the way we think it would work the best. Is the first, I'm going to make the UI slightly bigger, as always. And the default settings, you will find them in the file defaults, and then you see save startup file if you want to change, for example, if you want to save this scene. So every time you open Blender, you say this is what you will press. It used to be here, but it's just too many things. Like the install application templates was also here. There were a few other thingies there all over the place. But now the default is only in this panel. If you are already, for example, doing 2D animation or using a custom template, an application template, it will also show up here. So you can save this. Say, for example, you want to have a little Suzanne. Every time you start your 2D animation template, well, you can do files, default, say start a file. So functionality is the same, just a few things were moved around. The other things that were moved around were the install application template that used to be here in the file menu, which didn't really belong there. And also some links that were here in the help menu. They were not really for help. They were just more like about. So those are now under the Blender menu up here in the corner. You can now click on this icon. Before, it used to bring the splash screen, which it's useful in a way, but you can still do it here. It's the first item on the list. So if you click, hold, and just drag it, you get the same. But in theory, you shouldn't even use this that often, right? Because you have Control-N for the application templates, or Control-Shift-O for opening the recent files. Or what else do you have in the splash screen? Well, the version. But if you report a bug, by the way, if you go to help report a bug, the form that you would use to report the bug is gonna have the hash already in there, with also some of your settings from your computer. So that will be pretty do all the heavy lifting for you. Then the other options you're gonna, the other settings that you're gonna find is an install application template, because it's really a Blender wide thing. Also the about, you're gonna find the release notes, Blender website credits. They used to be here on the help menu, and you're also going to find about the license, which they were a few tweets this week about the Blender license and discussions and going on. So here you can find it more easily. So people that are, you will be amazed by how many people contact Ton or Blender in general saying like, is Blender really free? Well, now you know it is really free. Then support Blender. This is a the Blender store used to be on the help menu and also the development fund, but now this is more like clear. It's like bam, support Blender, so people know and are aware of it. And that's pretty much it for that menu. Actually, the other options are related to that area, and are when you start a new file. Last week there was a thing, a little like pop-up saying like, hey, you didn't save your changes. Now it's bringing this dialogue, which you probably have seen before here in the live streams, because it was the default dialogue for Linux when you close Blender, or when you do any kind of operation that is gonna break or not or write over your changes. It will have this dialogue, and now it's available for everybody, including Windows people. And in Windows you'll see that the buttons change. I think the save is on the left. It's different because the Microsoft guidelines, they say that the save button should be on one side, and it's just more, it will be coherent with the rest of your Windows applications. In Mac and Linux, it uses this layout, which discard changes on the left, and then all the operations like save is on the rightmost, and it's pre-highlighted. That's also on Windows, on Linux, and Windows and Linux and Mac and your iPad. No, okay, no iPad yet. So, all right. This was a big one. A lot of people were asking for it for years. It's like, how do you get that? So it's great to see it finally making it to the other operating systems. Then, all right, file close. So if you close a file, for example, say you're in general, for example, and you're painting a texture, for example, and you didn't save this, when you quit Blender, this menu got an extra setting. It was very common that if you didn't remember that you made some changes to your textures, you will just lose it. That's not very nice. So now when you have this save option, it will also show you how many, and if any, how many images are not saved. So if you have more images and you didn't change it, when you quit or when you open a new file, for example, if you go to like, I want to do sculpting, hey, save 2 modified images before. So yes, this is a huge, it's gonna save a lot of work. I've seen this happening in other, in some people like streaming or like working in Blender, recording a video, and yes, it wouldn't happen. So now it does. Now you're not gonna save, and there is a lot of more work done in like under the hood to prevent all kinds of weird, like for example, if you're painting and then you change some of the settings of your image, this now in the image pad, you're gonna see the save or the discard changes, and it's gonna go back to previously. So, or also if you change some of the, for example, these changes, now you only can do it once you save your image or once you discard the changes. Before it was possible to change them, and if you undo, you will also undo your painting changes. So really good for user experience. So hopefully this will save some lives sometimes, and some lives too. I mean, you don't know how much work you spend in it. So all right, let's file close dialog, UI confirm dialog when you don't have an unsaved file, which is pretty much the same. It basically applies to every time you close your file. Then the Blender menu and the help menu I already mentioned. There is also a link to the tutorials, which I didn't mention before. You can click on it and you will go to, you're gonna get redirected to Blender.org tutorials, which include the tutorials from the Blender Cloud, Blender Fundamentals, some of them from the community, and much more. This is fairly outdated, especially for 2.8, but there will be updates in this page. The good thing is that when 2.8 comes out, people can go and help tutorials or support, and they will see it. So pretty nice. Future, yes, I do love Blender. Best wishes to Pablo. Thank you, David. Thank you. Best wishes to the developers and everybody making it happen, and the community for providing feedback. There were so many changes with these menus, and thanks to the community providing feedback and being loud about it is how things get, you know, things happen. All right. The also the more menus. The edit menu, it used to have all the settings available all the time, and now only has the like they're now grayed out depending on whatever you have done. For example, I just opened this file, so it doesn't make sense that I see undo, redo, and all the settings because there's no undo history yet. So if you do a change, then you see the repeat last, undo, no redo because I didn't undo. But if I undo now, I should see the redo and the undo history. So that is also a very nice change for usability, for making the UI. It's insane. Like I explaining this thing is like, yeah, it's obvious, but I wasn't there in 2.7 and not even before, and not even 2.8 until last week. So that's a very nice change. It's made by Harley. So thank you for that. Next, the menus. So the tool settings, the top bar, it's hidden in some of the workspaces by default. It's already explained a couple weeks ago, but the option to show it was a bit hidden. You have to right click somewhere in between the buttons and then you could enable it. So this setting to make it more easy to be accessed, because remember that now we can actually click on objects that are behind the header. This wasn't working before because there was an invisible header. So now the option to bring the top bar is under View, Tool Settings, and then you can adjust it. It's very useful. All right, next, the sidebar. This is a small one, but a very welcome one, is that now all the sidebars, all the N panels, they have the same size in every workspace and also every editor where you are. It should have around the same size, even if you're like doing all kinds of like video editing or whatever. It should be consistent. Before it was done by hand, basically, whatever the developers had when they saved the file. All right. Remember the questions, by the way, they are on Blender.Today. No, not in here. I'm gonna keep an eye on it, but just remember that they are on Blender.Today. And I'm already running out of voice, and we should start it. Let's see. Oh, this is nice. The visibility panel for objects. Have you ever noticed? I haven't. Have you ever noticed that the outliner settings, like now the ones that we can now toggle on or off from the filters popover that was added last week? If you remember, I showed you how, and all these new columns that you can enable, disable. And have you ever noticed that these settings were not available anywhere else? You couldn't change the visibility of an object or the renderability or the selectivity anywhere else than in the outliner, which is kind of yeah, it wasn't very according to the 2.8 way of everything should be accessible everywhere from menus and buttons and panels. So now they are accessible in a new panel called visibility. It's here, it's under the object settings, because there's an object level. You can't apply it to different to materials, or it's only for objects. So you can have showing viewports, which basically toggles that one, showing renders, selectable, and that is it. Yes. What about the visibility? the it's not there. What it is there is the cycle settings. That's the one I was missing. In cycles, they also have some special settings, which you can see here in the visibility panel, shadow catcher, and holdout. These are the ray visibility. Also, they used to have their own panel called cycles panels. Now they have these specific panel dedicated to cycles. More settings. And speaking of panels, the normals panel, the one that used to be when you're in edit mode, they used to be up here. There used to be like a normals panel. Now this has been removed in order to have more to give more room to the normals menu here. So this also is gonna get a shortcut. We still haven't decided one. I think at least 10 minutes ago. It wasn't decided yet. But if you think of a good shortcut for it, let us know. But basically all the settings are now here in this normals menu, where you can edit the normals. You can do a bunch of now all the new custom normals stuff in 2.8. It should be available in that menu. Speaking of more panels, the last week or the week before, the sidebar got split into categories. There's item, tool, and view. This concept is also now applied to the node editor. So you also have, when you're, for example, playing with the nodes, you can also have item, tool, view, and options. So there is a bit more room for categories. Of course, tools, in this case, there is really not so many tools. So until we actually get more development going on in the tool department, at least now things are organized correctly. So the same for the sequencer and other areas. Since we are here, let's go to the texture paint. I already shown this before, but now the image settings, or like anytime you see an image or like generated, or when you open an image, for example, the layout used to be not single column. It used to be like all over the place with the buttons from 2.7. Now this is one single column, and everything should be aligned to the right when it makes sense. So that it makes it a bit more consistent, and it should apply everywhere actually. Even if you have a texture type image, then you should also see it here. Yes, you also see it here because it's shared across the Blender interface. All right, speaking of Blender interface, one little thing that I didn't mention is that you may have noticed that this looks a little bit different. Well, it is because now the default shading of the viewport, sorry, I forgot the word. The default shading of the viewport is no longer studio, is now matcap. So the shade is a little bit better. You will still see all the if you have multiple objects and you have random, you will still see it. If you have single color object or even material settings, you will also be able to see the color. So that hasn't changed. If you apply any color, you will still see it, but it has this matcap, which doesn't change the colors of your shading. It just affects the volume of it. So it looks a bit nicer. It's easier to deal with it. All right. So the factory settings, and here, as you can see, I had the old theme settings. Now you will see it, and now it's orange like it used to be. I had a theme applied. All right. Speaking of themes, what a good segues I'm doing today without actually trying it. The outliner got some very nifty improvements. You probably have noticed already the circle. It used to be a circle around the icons or the whatever object you had, object data you had selected. The issue was that this icon would sometimes be would like overlap with the icon, this outline, this circular outline. Sometimes it will overlap with the actual icon because the icon was for example, in this case, the camera icon is not circular, so it would look weird. So now they have these nice rounded corners. I can actually make it even bigger for you to see. There you go. So it has nice rounded corners. Also, when you have the when you're in edit mode, it should show with a nice the same color as the object data color. So it's all a little bit more clear. What is more clear also is that the name of the active object also gets the same color of the active objects in the viewport. So as you can see, this monkey here is bright orange because it's the active objects. So I see it as active and bright orange here. And the other objects that are selected but not active, they are dark orange, and they also highlight as well. Just as for Suzanne. What happened to Suzanne? I can't wait for no more changes. Yes, I know it's a lot to take in. It's the last week. Next week, the changes should be way less and should be more like fixes, because there are also tons. I almost say a bad word. I should keep this family friendly. And there are also many fixes in UI, in the EV. Actually, one of the fixes that was very annoying was that in the outliner, sometimes if you would move the mouse out, this hover highlight would get stuck, and then you will end up with like 2 times the highlight, the blue one and the other one. So very nice little additions, and there is some other additions to the outliner that are coming for 2.81, which are just amazing. Alrighty. Oh, by the way, have you noticed that now the selectivity is not on by default here? So this setting, which is not always used, the like it's more like more advanced use, so it's not always there. It's things to keep things a bit more clean and tidy. All right, next. Oh, more theme settings. Yes, because the color of the active object and these colors in here, they can be tweaked, but also the colors here can be tweaked. The these zebra kind of lines that every other row gets a different color, because it makes it easy when you have like long names and when to see what it corresponds from the left to the right. This is now a setting, so you can change it, or you can make it a complete rainbow if you want. Not complete rainbow. I wish that would actually make more more sense. So basically, it's a color for the alternate rows. So if you remove the alpha, it's a transparency. So if you remove the transparency, then you get a completely flat outliner without any color variation. However, if you want to go nuts, you can have the nice zebra. Let's make it zebra. There you go. A nice zebra, unreadable, but I guess you want to keep it like very subtle, or remove it altogether and just not have it super clean. So there is a new clean outliner. By default, there is still a little bit here, reset. So there's still a little bit of the zebra, but it's just it's a bit less intense than it used to be. Then that it's all for the outliner, I think. Yes. The restriction columns also, they are shown, for example, here, as you can see, they're not available, so they're grayed out, but in general, and they're turned on, off, so that's why they show up like that. And the header key, so if you change the state of one of the properties on the top level, they will affect the ones underneath. All right. More settings. Let's change from this outliner editor to the user preferences. So last week, if I'm not wrong, yeah, last week I showed you how there were like 3 buttons here where you could save or revert or activate the autosave of the preferences. Now it's all autosave by default, so whatever you change, So for example, say I want to change this to 1 or like 1.2, something like that. Then if I close Blender and I open it again, it saves the settings. So you don't have to think about saving the settings anymore because it's autosave by default. So that will also save you some lost changes. The great thing though is that this autosaves in specific cases. For example, if you assign a shortcut, if you want to change the shortcut for rendering, for example, and you don't like F12, so you right click and you change the shortcut and you assign it to whatever other key you want. For example, I'm going to use F8, and then I just close Blender, I open it again, and I should press F8 to render. There you go. So that's a nice little thing. You don't have to remember to save your shortcuts anymore. Now it does it for you. It's like Blender got smarter last week somehow. The other thing that saves is the quick favorites. So if you use the quick favorites a lot, like right click in a setting that allows you to do it, for example, add to quick favorites, it's also going to be saved automatically if you don't do anything by default. However, if you don't want that, if you rather have your preferences saved when you want it to, not by default, you can disable it from here, from the little hamburger icon here on the corner, disable autosave, and it's gonna show you the save preferences button to save them manually. And then every time you change something, you want to save it, and it's gonna be like that. The button's gonna be grayed out, so to tell you that you're basically all your settings are whatever is saved. But as soon as you change something, it will be available again, so you can press it. So that way you know if you change something. Again, Blender getting smarter every day. From this menu, you can also reset to the default settings, not the default file. So if you have for example, a bunch of scenes and stuff, a bunch of monkeys on your scene, and you want to keep them, but you want to only revert the preferences, the changes that you have done, you can by just clicking on it, load factory preferences, and it does it for you. This is great. I think I already explained it last week, but it's just so good because before you have to load factory startup and you will lose your scene. You have to always do it with your scene empty. So it was very kind of annoying even. All right. So let's that is for the preferences. Now sequencer. All right. Sequencer settings. Mainly interface wise, there were some actually many updates in regards to the menus, to some settings that were not really they were not really exposed anywhere, and there's also a context menu. So let's quickly go through some of them. I'm not gonna be able to show all of the settings, but actually one of them that I really like is the way, this is not related to the actual buttons and menus and stuff, it's the way that video movie files, they get added. When you drag and drop an image or a video, it will place the video strip, the movie strip, on the top and the audio one on the bottom, like every other software out there or at least those that make video editing. So that was something that it wasn't really didn't really make a lot of sense to have the sound on the top, and usually in some other softwares they have like two different sections altogether for like the video and the audio, but at least now in the Blender way this is more consistent. Then all the menus here on the side, they were refactored to work better, to be a bit more readable. They're also right aligned. There is, when they make sense, there is an offset setting. I think this should always show, right? But grayed out, but not like disappear. Otherwise you end up with an empty offset menu. And the same for the crop settings. They are now right aligned, so they matched with the rest of Blender, and they're basically split into categories too, so there is more room for activities. I think previously only the modifiers were in a separate tab, except and not the other ones. But yes, the sequencer is getting some love as well. Some missing menu entries were in the for select box, for example. Now you can click anywhere in the sequencer to select. There is the sound crossfade also wasn't there. The toggle meta data wasn't there also for the strips. Then this is for when you are in preview mode here. View, show metadata. It wasn't available there. Then the gap remove. So when you want to remove a gap between two strips, this wasn't even there. So now it is. I only have to find where it is. But yes, it's there. Believe me. So yes, many tricks to the user interface to make it more friendly. This is work mainly from the video sequencer community that has been paying so much attention, especially Peter Fogg, Tint Watin, and he's been working so hard, and he has a thread on DevTalk with the outlining all the items that were missing, and there are patches for adding even new operators to make it even more friendly, but those have to wait until 2.81 because it's just too many things to add at the moment, and we are on a UI freeze, remember, or we're about to. All right, so last thing is just regarding the user interface is icons. There are new icons all over the place, so if you find something different, that's why. Also, the desktop icon changed. Now the desktop icon will follow the blender.org/about/logo. The logo guidelines in blender.org show you the actual color, like the Pantone color that you have to use. And now those are used by the Blender app itself. So everything matches and it's all neatly. So yes. The user interface, key maps and stuff. Wow, I'm still far from finish. All right, let's power through it. Key maps. Remember in 2.7 there used to be a way to change your actual your current frame without going to the sequencer, to the animation editors or the sequencer, and that shortcut used to be Alt and scroll. So now that is back. You can Alt and then scroll. Sweet ASMR for changing the current frame. So it's very nice because you can be full screen there working on your armature, like even like posing your one bone animation, and then you can quickly go, like if you have it here in one frame, and then you go more frames like that. You see I'm changing frame without actually losing my mouse, my right hand. So you just quickly go and here left, and you add another keyframe, and it's so nice. Look, man, no hands. Well, almost no hands. All right, that is actually one of the settings that came back from 2.7, that it was already there. The other thing that it's being discussed is to have Alt left mouse button to scrap, because right now it's Shift right mouse button and not everybody is super happy about it. So it's being discussed to add Alt left mouse button to it, but it's not there, at least on my build right now. Then the node editor got another little, it's actually pretty huge. It's not really that huge, but the nodes previously, and this is also other things that look so insignificant, but they were there actually in Blender 2.7 when you had multiple like nodes, but you wanted to like move them. It will only move the active node. So select everything, click and drag, and would only move the active node. How annoying was that? You had to press G for moving everything. Now in Blender 2.8, when you select multiple and then click and drag, it will drag the selected one, so you can just quickly do that. Again, small thing, huge improvement in usability. All right, and next. removability to, oh yes, file browser. In the file browser, there was an option that it can be very dangerous. It could be, not anymore because it's disabled now. But basically, in the outliner, you could previously press X on a file, so you select the file, you could press X to delete it, and that it brought up warning, right? It's okay, but still it will delete it completely. Like, it wouldn't send it to the trash or anything because it didn't know about it. It should just delete it, and that is too dangerous. So for now, it's removed. You can't remove files from the file browser until the in 2.81. The idea is that there will be like a nice way of doing it, like using whatever operating system API to actually send the file to the trash, because Blender wasn't sending it to the trash and you could lose your things, your information forever. So better safe than sorry. You can still make folders, by the way, but you can't remove them. So, but you couldn't remove them before anyway. So that's the only thing that is a bit annoying, that you can make folders and then you can't remove them. You will end up with a new folder. So, all right, next, the industry compatible key map. This is okay. It has tons of new updates, but I couldn't go through all of them. They're just way too many. So if you're not familiar with it, the industry standard key map is a key map that allows you to quickly change between other applications and feel like at home, because it will change your shortcuts to be more standard with the other apps. Which is, I guess, good if you're already advanced with Blender, I think, because otherwise you are not going to be able to follow any tutorials, because the tutorials are going to use the default. However, if you do use it, there are some very nice changes here, and this week one of the changes was to use 1, 2, 3 for changing like the numbers on your keyboard on the top of your keyboard to change the modes, and then 4 for object mode, 5 for sculpt, vertex paint, weight paint, texture paint. So that's basically the change. And remember, we used to have that in the Blender key map sometimes last year, but it got changed. But now it's in the industry standard key map according to public user feedback, community feedback. All right, outliner, implement shift click for objects as well. Yeah, now in the okay, now I have to start my default because I had no idea how the industry standard key map works. Next, this is, I already mentioned actually, in the outliner, if you do shift clicked, it will also affect the objects underneath. So it will change the setting that you click on and also change it for the child objects. So in this case, all the objects inside this collection, when I shift click, will like ripple all that action that I'm doing. Changes. This is a small one. The camera now has a bit better defaults. By default, the Blender camera had and this is related to a feature by Untitled and Eevee, which is pretty exciting. So stay tuned. But the camera now has by default a depth of field focus distance of 10, because before it was 0. So if you turn on depth of field, then suddenly everything will be blurry because, yeah, there was no it wasn't set to anything. And why 10? Well, one, because it's a nice number, round number, and actually it's the exact distance to the cube by default. So it's also give you something to see when you actually enable that setting. The f-stop is also 2.8, so you will see actually a difference here in the viewport when you have when you're using the depth of field either from the workbench or from the Eevee or cycles, which brings me to this change. Eevee. So with Eevee, there has been tons of speed ups, especially when you're drawing a mesh, when you're drawing an edit mode is now much faster, should be more compatible with pretty much more older graphics cards. but especially with an Intel graphics card. There were some issues that the shaders wouldn't look good in Eevee. Now they do. So if you had issues with your Intel graphics card on Eevee, make sure you check tomorrow, the build from tomorrow, because it still hasn't been compiled. Remember that every night they get refreshed, and that should be fixed. But what's even better is to have less options, or at least share this option. So last year, I'm already, and I'm not even having beer like I used to in this show in the past. I'm having water, sponsored by the Cold Quest 2018. And the last Blender.Today, I showed you how now the settings of your lamps, of your lights, using 2.8 terms, are now shared with cycles. So if you have this I already mentioned last week, but basically if you're in the render settings, now for example, the intensity of your lamp and the radius, they will also be aligned with cycles. So when you change between one and the other, you shouldn't see many changes, of course, except the actual ray tracing, but it should be fairly close. With this in mind, this week there are two new big things that were done to cycles and Eevee to make them match. One of them is the film transparency. So in the film panel under render settings, you will find in cycles, you will see film transparent. You would see that it's actually used by both engines the same, so it's actually shared between them. So you go to Eevee and you still have it here. I don't see the transparent. Here, the transparent button. Oh, because in the other one there are actual options, so now it's here. But if you enable it in one, you will be enabled in the other. So another setting that gets shared between two different render engines. Awesome. Speaking of awesome, the other setting that got shared between the two render engines is the depth of field. And I don't know if you noticed when I showed you just now that for turning on depth of field, the only thing I had to do was clicking on depth of field. This is now shared with Eevee. Eevee used to have a setting here in the button for the depth of field, like a toggle that you could turn on or off. This setting is no longer a scene setting, but a camera setting. So you can have a camera with depth of field, and you can have another camera without. So you can switch between them. So it makes more sense, right? You don't have to keep track of which camera has depth of field. Now it's not a scene setting, but a camera setting. Super nice. Less settings for the win, and more closer for Eevee and cycles. But what's better than that? What's better than mixing settings is to not have settings at all. For example, the volumetrics in Eevee, you will have to always, you will set up your volumes in your material settings, but then if you didn't enable volumetric on the render settings, then you wouldn't see them. So that led to a lot of confusion because you have to turn on a setting twice. Not anymore. Now volumetric is going to be enabled if there is a volume material in your scene. So it's automatic. You don't have to worry about it. And the same has been done for the subsurface scattering, which was also an issue because it used to be that you could change your subsurface settings here on your material, and you would not see it in the viewport, but you would see it in the preview. So especially with the nice new preview here, you would see it here, but not in the viewport. That was strange. So now it's enabled always only if there is a object using it actually. So if you don't have it, it's going to be faster. So if you put it back to 0, it's going to be just as fast. Very nice. So much love for cycles. Yes, cycles and Eevee for both. Both. They're all in the same family, so it's good to have them over. All right. So what's better than no settings? It's more granularity in the settings. So the backface culling used to be an object setting. Now it's a per material setting. So if you go in this in Eevee, so if you go to the settings of your material, you will gonna find the backface culling. So that way it won't calculate whatever is on the other side. So it's good for performance, and it's per material, so you have more control over it. All right. Gee, already 48. I have 10 minutes left and I still have things to show. All right, animations. Now when you're animating, okay, so for example, I have a rig. If I had a good rig like Rigify, I'm afraid I'm not gonna make it to actually answer some questions, but this is just so neat. So when you have a rig, for example, this is the T pose, like the default, the rest pose. But what if you change your animation a little bit and you want this to be your rest pose? Well, before you could apply pose as rest pose, it would take the whole pose and apply it as a rest, like as a new T pose. Now this also takes into account the selected bones. So before, even if you didn't have any selected bone, it will apply the whole mesh, the whole armature. Now only applies to the selected bones. Then okay, grease pencil. The grease pencil, I'm going like this. All right, so in the grease pencil settings that I showed you last or 2 weeks ago, where you can change, for example, the options in the stroke to follow the here. Or I'm drunk again and I didn't. Well, basically the follow drawing path. So when you draw a line, I don't see it here, and I think I'm just a bit too going through too many things too fast, and I don't find it. But basically the follow drawing path, when you draw a line with a grease pencil, that I will apply like textures to it, for example, like in the video that we shown last week by Peppeland, that you would see the Blender developers. So if you see in this video that it will draw the lines, it will follow the path. Now there's three options actually. One to not rotate at all, one to follow the object rotation, and the other one is to follow the path, the one that you actually drawn. So there is 3 options for that now. All right, 10 minutes. Let's go through it again. Render. There is render improvements, but that's basically just faster, especially when you have small tiles. This applies to cycles. So there has been improvements, and according to the tests, it works especially better when you have small tiles, and it can go like heaps faster, like the default scene apparently, or the empty scene on a 1080p screen with 8x8 tiles went from 9 seconds to almost 2 seconds to less. So it's actually quite fast. Wow, nice improvement. I wish we had that for spring, because there were a lot of small tiles that we had and the overhead was insane. Then another setting that I cannot show you, but because I'm using Linux, but this only applies to Windows, is the default directory for fonts. So if you have your preferences, file paths, the fonts in Linux, in Windows, is going to show you the actual place where Windows put it. I'm not sure what it is, but now it should work. Then object. Oh, this is a nice one. This is on my list of miscellaneous, but actually it's actually pretty neat. This makes the rotation of the 3D cursor finally useful. So many months, I would say over a year ago, the 3D cursor was upgraded from 2D to 3D. Now when you click and when you position the 3D cursor, not by default, but when you use, for example, the 3D cursor tool, and you change the setting, for example, to use the geometry as orientation, it will apply to here. It will follow the view of your, like it will align to the, it's not doing it here. Or maybe in edit mode. There you go. So it will follow the, it would align to the way, having a hard time here, to the direction, to the normals. So basically it would move the 3D cursor, and I am not getting it correctly to work here, but it should align to the direction of the normals. So that way, now when you add a new object, and this is the second part of the awesome, for example, when you add a cone, you can choose from the properties or the F9. Remember that now there is also the F9 menu. You can choose the alignment to be world view, like align to view, which used to be an option here too, and now you can choose 3D cursor, which is gonna just align it to how it goes, how it 3D cursor is. I don't know why I cannot. I think it's just a bug. Looks like it, or I'm doing something wrong. I'm using surface project. Oh, there you go. Huh, now I made it work, and now if I add a cone, it should, yeah, there you go. So I was doing something wrong, but also this needs a lot of testing, so please test it. But here you can see it in action, actually. Add another cone. Now I'm gonna add cones all over the place, aligned like they should be. And now it's working. Hey, it just needs a little love. All right, next. Well, all the images changes, actually. I can't go through all of them because I saved the description of the commit logs because there's just so many changes. When you're painting textures in Blender, like I said before, it's really hard to lose changes because it's gonna prompt you. It's gonna ask you like, hey, you didn't save these changes. But also if you change some of the properties, it's also gonna mark it as modified. And also if you it supports for packing, you can actually pack your unsaved images, and it should be smarter. Like it will hide the unpack button because it really then makes it wasn't predictable. It didn't make a lot of sense. And the use alpha setting has been replaced. So that is one of the settings that it reminds me of the 2.4 era, or even before, that an image you could use a use alpha setting. Now there is a drop-down menu that shows the straight alpha, so just as it is, like completely plain, pre-multiplied, channel packed, and known. So no alpha, ignored. Then the other thing that, since I'm here just reading because I have 5 minutes left, is that the lights, the sunlight has a, here, I'm using the default settings. And how do you select? There you go, shift. Oh, because I didn't have the tool setting. Right click select, dudes, use right click select. It's so much simpler. Then the lamps, the sun lamp has a setting that used to be there, but now it got renamed. The size of the sun lamps didn't really make sense for a sun, because the size of the sun, I guess it wouldn't fit in this in meters here, so it didn't make a lot of sense. But the angle though does. So the result is the same. It's just gonna make the shadow more like diffuse or not, but it's basically used as an angle. So that's if you are if you make add-ons that were using that property, so make sure you check it again. Or if you don't find the size slider, it's because that was changed. Remove double-sided, that was legacy basically, and it has been removed. So if you have an add-on that it was using it, make sure you update it, because it wasn't even working actually in the viewport. And the API for panels, there is a new property called BLOrder that allows you to sort the panels. And this is used for example, to always place the custom properties at the bottom and for cycles. And it's used mainly internally. And I hope the add-on developers are not going to be fighting for sorting their panels before or after. The best is just to leave it at the registration automatically. So you just don't use that BLOrder preference and it will, or setting, and it will sort them by the order they get registered. All right, so it's been so many questions. Let's see if I manage in 3 minutes to explain some of them. Please give Pablo 30 minutes more time. But then it's going to end up in a 1.5 hour live stream, and I don't think anybody's going to watch that. They already have a hard time watching a 1 hour live stream. So, and I also have another live stream to start in 1 hour, which is in Spanish. All right, so Ray Leonard asks, please add a viewport grid units back. You can't tell whether one grid is 1 millimeter, centimeter, or 1 meter. Is it, yeah, I think they should be added back. Why? Is there any reason why not? Has been added, so it's in from February. So I think it just needs more attention. Yeah, let's try to squeeze it in for 2. For the freeze. I'm wondering if we're gonna get an UI operator for the EXR multi-layer post-render denoising before the UI freeze. I don't think it's gonna make it though. There's still the operator, but I don't know if I haven't heard any plans of that. I might be wrong, but it's very tight. Hi Pablo, I think this Blender is really slow with big scenes and high polys. Yeah, tell me something new. Working in the viewport, loading meshes and texture while rendering, and controls undo is so slow. And will it ever be improved? Yes, ever. Yes, that is like, it will be improved. It's just it's just not like a make it fast. I think it's a deeper problem in the way undo works, and it's something to be worked on before the release. Like, this is not a UI freeze feature. The undo is gonna be improved, but it's really is nothing new. It's the way it works. Basically, every time you undo, is like a whole new blend file gets saved, basically. So it needs some love. And it's gonna be taken care of. You've seen the blend files from Spring. There are 40,000 objects. Imagine how was it for us to work with that. And we are here even. So, okay, Darksider. Hi, Pablo. I noticed that in the last builds, the Blender icon in the corner was replaced by the Blender text. Not anymore. Recompile again. Setcorp. My question is why the UV editor still have the old transform tool when we change. Why is the UV editor still have the old transform tool? It just needs updating, I think. I'm not sure, but I think it needs updating. But there is work left in that area. Will we ever see ambient occlusion vertex color baking in 2.8? Cycle did in 2.7. Also, can we save vertex group selection? Why not edge and face groups? Face group exists actually. Yeah, face maps. This exists. Edge not yet. But the ambient occlusion vertex color baking, it's cycles did it in 2.7. Then it should be in 2.8 actually. I'm sorry, I'm not up to date with that area. Yes, Crumbles. Will there be upgrades on motion camera tracking? Not for 2.80. Is it possible to use onion skinning with non-grease pencil objects? No, only for grease pencil objects and armatures at the moment. Is it possible to do smears instead of motion blurs, like in Spider-Verse? I don't think they had like a tool for doing the smears immediately before making Spider-Verse, but maybe after. They really developed it for it, I think, from the making of that I've seen. And no, there's no currently a tool for that. You can always sculpt or like sculpt your baked meshes. Is there a way to do Lord of the Rings CGI AI armies in Blender? There is the Crowd Sim 3D add-on, which is maybe this is what you're looking for. It's developed by by two main core developers. that are already working in Blender, that they work in the compositor and very tough areas in Blender, so they are familiar with the code, and they are you can trust these people. It's AtMind. So yeah, check it out, crowdsim3d.com. Yes, come. All right. Next question: is it a way to make quick favorite menu not disappear when the mouse leaves the menu? Not at the moment. Said the transform gizmos are good for modeling but not for animation. Good suggestions. I'm gonna move to the actual questions. Should be hidden when doing transformation. Shouldn't be hidden. Yeah, actually this was already proposed. Get rid of the infinite dimensional lines. It's gonna move to the shorter question. Sorry, it's just I'm already 5 minutes past. Next, I hate to be one of those guys, but any chance we can get the Blender icon back? That's already back. Hi Pablo, I noticed the view selected all in Blender doesn't zoom accurately whole viewport. If it's a bug, please report it. If it doesn't work like it used to be, please report it. Why do you not remove the header and make custom header for Windows and add the cut? It's not easy to make the custom header. That's already been proposed. I have my mockup from like forever ago that has the file menu embedded with the close buttons, but yeah, I made this like years ago, and it's not easy because we have 3 platforms and they all work differently. When will be able to shift select the transform tools? Not possible at the moment, but that's not possible at the moment. You can enable and disable the gizmos from here, from the move, rotate, scale. And we are thinking of ways to make this a bit more accessible, because at the moment this is just not ideal. Loving all the progress. I find the new modeling and sculpting tools to be unintuitive. You can collapse the text next to the tools, leaving only the icons, or collapse both the text and the icons. Is there any way to collapse the icon and only leave the text? No, it's only the text and icons. Is there some place I can contribute constructive criticism? Yes, in with the tool icon designs, and they're final, or are they final now? They are final as they haven't changed in a while, but you can always use the dev talk forums, which you can, for example, there's the icons thread, which is more for like the actual Blender, the small icons, or you can also start a thread for the other kind of icons, for the tool icons. Next question. I'm already 5 minutes past, so I'm gonna do 5 more questions here. So hello Blender. No, hello Blender has become hello Blender. Hey Blender has become a much more mature. Let me close this here so I have some room I cannot see. All right, so has become a much more mature software. Yes. However, the UI and UX and of the dope sheet can be improved with some basic adjustments. Sometimes basic is not always basic. Let's see. Moving keyframes using only mouse. Yeah, the click and drag. That should, I think that should work. Not sure. Dope sheet can be really populated with lots of keyframes. There are some header keys while animating, but once you open them all, there is a lot of keyframes vertically shows. I will have to go through it again. Sorry, it's a bit too long and trying to get fast. I'm gonna leave this open here so I can check it later. Sila says the real-time physics is now nearly a year in development. It's actually not in development for over a year. And yeah, there has been no updates on that. I'm sorry. T. Madison. Hi Pablo, what settings are needed to be changed, or is a plugin needed to achieve a fully extended dash crosshair within only the what? It's commonly found in CAD type programs and is quite useful. There are, as far as I know, no settings. I can't see where exactly what is what you were pointing at. But I'll move to the next. Sorry. Ilya. Hi Pablo, thank you for making the show. Is it possible to make the quick favorites like this menu? They're could be a way, but the quick favorite can get very long. So what happens when you reach more than 8? It can be tricky because you can only have 8 in the pie menu. All right, Joseph Berg. Hey Pablo, I have a suggestion for the asset management. I'd like to be able to have each of my files use the same location as the home project folder. Is that already possible? There is no asset management in Blender currently. It's one of the targets for 2.81. So okay, I already did like over 5, but let's do 3 more. Hola, señor Pablo. Can you please hand over to Mr. Sebastian these 2 super mega quick and light suggestions for the new shortcut system? Sebastian is not here anymore, so you can actually reach to him on Blender.Chat, or better yet, actually put them in the DevTalk user feedback forum and maybe mention him. Developers are hanging out there, so yes, provide it in the feedback. Number 2, Facundo says, regarding the fake user button, I think it should always be on by default, because for example, if you create different animation clips, but the animation is different though. Whenever you create a new clip, you should always remember to click that button. That already has been discussed. It actually used to be like that in the past, but it changed. So it needs a bit more thinking. There were reasons why not. Otherwise, you will end up with like tons of actions that you didn't need. For that, we need an asset manager where you can actually see all the orphan data, all the things they're going to lose if you save or not, or a way to clean all the unused actions, for example. We need an asset manager. 2.81. And last question, when weight painting in 2.8, is there a shortcut to toggle between add and subtract? Shift, I think, or control. Let's try one of the modifiers. And that's it. I way over time, but I think I managed to answer at least some of the questions. Sorry I didn't get to answer all of them, but it's just so many updates this week with the UI freeze and everything. So if you want to read more, remember in the code.blender.org there's a quick link to all the meeting notes where you can read more about the features that I talked about today. You get a nice blog post in the DevTalk forums, and it's been quite a show actually. What happened to me? All right, cool. Phew, we did it. We got through. The Blender user interface for 2.80, it's frozen, almost frozen, in just a matter of now, tomorrow to the day after is like in these days, but hopefully this will lead to more time into bug fixing, into like just getting all the parts tidy, and all the work that has been done in the last 3 years in 2.8 nicely packed for a 2.80 release. Remember, this is not the end of the world. Everything in everything that is being worked on is going to be polished and polished and polished, and the features that didn't make it to 2.80 are going to be part of 2.81. Also, there are in the works there are branches. What is it? It's a fork of Blender that it maintains the same code, but it actually has some extra features. For example, the Sculpt team is doing that. They are developing new features in their branch, which you can actually download from Graphic All. So they are not affected by this UI freeze. They just, actually it's better for them because not a lot of things are going to change in terms of the UI, so they can keep it up to date. So here's what you can find: graphical.org, or in blender.community you can find the graphical community in there. So by the way, there is a site now, there is a new community for Blender Greece, and they already been chatting there in a language that I don't understand. It's so cool, but if you speak Greek you will realize it. It's also Italian, by the way. If you speak Italiano, if you parla italiano, possiamo avere, no, I'm not sure what I'm saying. The same for French and any community. If you have a community like speak the same language, you want to share, you want to have a place to hang out, just let us know, and we're going to make a community for you in here. So, all right, back to the full screen. Remember, this is not the end of the world. In maybe the user interface or the sequencer is going to have a branch too for developing new features for the Blender sequencer that didn't make it to 2.80, and then they can be added to 2.81. So pretty exciting times, because it means that we're only, if we're gonna only be fixing bugs from now until July, it's very likely that we're gonna make this deadline. So yes, pretty exciting. All right, so again, this time of the day where I warn you if you have wet headphones, because the epic is coming, and in the shape of Street Fighter in 3, 2. Tan, taran, taran. I think for the Blender conference we have to play this live. So if you know how to play any kind of instrument that can deal with this, leave me a note. See you at Blender Conference 2019 for a live Blender today. Who knows? Ciao. Thank you.